Most parts of D&D have mechanical start and stop times so that DMs and players know when it is time for something to happen. Someone moves to cause harm to another creature? Roll initiative. Need to perform a slightly complicated task? Make a skill check. But there's one very vital part of the game that is largely left up to DM and players to make their own way, to figure it out. But what if we change that? What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today we're going to be talking about something that came up in a recent Twitch stream that I did where we were talking about D&D 4th Edition's Dungeon Master's Guide 2, which is in reference to a previous video. I'll put a link right here in case you haven't seen it yet. But what I want to talk about is a section of Chapter 1 group storytelling that talks about vignettes and why I think they should be a part of anyone's game and is guaranteed to make it better. And there's a very good chance you're already doing it. You just don't call it this or put a whole lot of thought into it. But if you do, it's going to be so much better. So a vignette is a structured point of role play where the dungeon master lays a scene before the players, designates who is going to be involved in that scene, and then lets the players take the ball and run with it. Then, once the scene has played out or is beginning to go on a little long, the DM then guides things to a natural conclusion. Pretty simple. It's a very simple concept that I think is lacking in a lot of games. And I know a lot of you are going to be asking the question, why introduce mechanics into roleplay? Roleplay is the one part of the game that doesn't have any kind of mechanics. You can do what you want, when you want, you have freedom. And I'm not proposing doing away with that. If a random moment of roleplay comes up in your game, you should absolutely chase that and go with it. But there are some pretty great things that you can do by introducing a level of structure and mechanism to the roleplay in your game. There are even rules in the DMG2 for awarding XP for this kind of thing, so that a session that is comprised entirely of roleplay and character exploration can still be rewarding from a mechanical standpoint. The rules exist in that. I'm not going to get into those kind of rules here. I just want to go over what vignettes are and why I think they are so great and vital to a truly great game of D&D. But before we get into the how, let's get into the why. Why is it a good idea to introduce this mechanical aspect, this mechanical structuring to role-playing in your game? Well, first and foremost, there are a lot of players out there that love role-playing. They love exploring their character. They love getting into the nitty-gritty of motivations and going back and forth with an NPC or another PC. But just from a personality standpoint, they're not the most assertive person. They don't want to try to talk over other people and assert themselves at the table to have the spotlight on them. And if they play at a table with people that are that way, they're not going to get a whole lot of chance to role play. You're going to have other players jumping in to be like, oh, okay, I know what to say here, and beginning to just run with it. I'm that way. If you all watch Kyber Shards, our actual play, I'm one of the first people to dive in ready to role play. And I try to be aware of the other players at my table and make way for them when it's a scene that makes more sense for them to role play in. But I'm sure there's points where I get excited at a table and just want to role play. But by introducing this structured vignette style where the dungeon master can say, okay, this is the scene that we're doing, these are the people involved in it, and this is the basic starting point, you eliminate all of that guesswork. You allow those players who maybe don't want to try to shout over other players to have that moment in the spotlight, to be able to say, no, this scene is for them. We will have one for you later. Vignettes allow you as the DM to dictate, like, okay, we're going to have some downtime before the next part of the adventure. Perhaps it's during a rest. And player A has been having some friction with NPC X. So they're going to be on watch together. While everybody else is resting around the fire, you two are the ones awake. So we're going to have a short scene where you all interact and talk through what happened and why there's been this level of friction, and go. And so what you've done is you've set up the spotlight for this character, and you've set up a situation where the other players cannot interject, even if they really, 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 really want to, because they're sleeping. You're asleep. No, stop it. You're resting. You have to rest. If you want to wake up and role play, I'll allow it, but you're not going to get a long rest out of this. Are you sure you want to get up? because the name of the game is allowing, in this specific circumstance, the name of the game is allowing this player to have a chance to role play without other players jumping in and trying to insert their own talking points into the scene. On the flip side of things, there are more than a few players who do not come to tables to role play. They're here for the strategy, they're here for the combat, they're here for optimization, they're here for a number of things outside of role play. And those are totally valid ways to play. I'm not saying that they're playing the game wrong. You can't play this game wrong. But what happens in a lot of roleplay scenes is those players start to get impatient. They start to wear down. They start to want the game to move on because they don't know when this is going to end. If you have one player character and a DM's NPC just going back and forth for 45 minutes, check out Eberron Renewed, our actual play podcast, for some actual instances of that occurring. Then you're going to have your other players starting to get antsy, starting to get dissatisfied with the way the game is going, especially if they don't care about role play. And so what vignettes do is it provides a structure. You could even say at the outset, like, okay, I'm looking for this to be like a 5 to 10 minute scene between this person and this person. Let's go. And so you're putting a timeline, and you don't have to like cut people off at the timer, but maybe because part of a vignette is the DM interjecting to start guiding things towards a natural conclusion, that can be the point where you step in and like, okay, let's start heading this direction. That provides the other players an idea of how long this is going to take and reassurance that you as the dungeon master are keeping their fun in mind, that you're not going to get caught up in the scene and role playing and going back and forth to the detriment of their fun, because the DM's job is to facilitate fun for everybody. And if somebody's not having fun at the table, then that needs to be examined. So vignettes allow you to have that structure and put those other players at ease that, yes, we're about to start a scene between one of my NPCs and this very talkative player, but I'm aware there's a structure to it, and then we're going to move on. And then additionally, vignettes allow games to explore things that just D&D on its surface, as it is presented in the books, could never explore, could never dive into if you're just playing this game on its surface, just going from point A to point B, role playing when it feels right, in the present, in the moment. Vignettes provide you so much more to work with. So that brings us into how to do vignettes. But before we move on, if you are enjoying this video, please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It does help out the channel a whole heck of a lot. We are on the path to 2,000 subscribers, and when we hit that point, I'm going to buy one of you a D&D book of your choosing. So yeah, be sure to go down, subscribe to the channel. It helps out a whole heck of a lot. And if you want to talk about this stuff in real time, this is where this whole video idea came from, was from my streams over at Twitch, twitch.tv/thegeekpantheon. I stream every Sunday and Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central and Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Come by, hang out. We talk about stuff like this a lot, and I would love to have you. So in the 4th edition D&D Dungeon Master's Guide 2, they outline 5 different types of vignettes, which are good categories. There certainly are not a comprehensive list of every kind of vignette that could exist, but it's a good starting point to start thinking about how to use these in your game. So the most obvious one is current conflicts between PCs and other characters, or between different PCs, where you can have a moment to stop and say, okay, this is a situation that needs to be addressed, that needs to be dealt with because it is intra-party conflict or conflict between a reoccurring NPC and a PC, or a rival that's recently come back and a player character. All of these things warrant some good role play and some dedicated time to talk through things and get to the bottom of grievances and conflict. And this is a great use of vignettes because you as the Dungeon Master get to set up and dictate, okay, so I want to have a scene where these two characters who have been having a lot of conflict are in a situation where they have to talk, where they can't just like stand about idly. We need to have some kind of beginning towards a reckoning, not necessarily a resolution, but getting beyond the passive aggressive snide remarks, if that's what's been going on in your game. And so forcing these two player characters into a situation, and at that point you can open it up to the players and be like, okay, so what situation would your characters need to be in for this to happen? let's talk about it. Let's figure out what that looks like. And then once you have that established, you plop them in and you let the players go. And then they're going back and forth, and you, as the dungeon master, can then at a certain point step in and say, okay, so we're hitting this point of kind of a natural conclusion. So it sounded like over the course of this conversation, you all were moving towards becoming even further detached from each other as opposed to coming closer together and understanding. So why don't we work towards a point where one of you just snaps and walks away? And so then you've provided the players the direction for how to resolve the scene. So that's a really great tool. It can go a long way towards having your characters' conflicts have more structure. And a lot of players might balk at this and feel like you're dictating how their characters should respond, which is why it is paramount that you as the dungeon master are open to input and asking them, okay, so what does a situation look like where your character would want to do this? What does that look like? Tell me, so we can work towards building something that is going to feel true to your character. The next one they talk about is flashbacks, to illuminate an important part of a character's backstory or history. And this one is phenomenal for players who enjoy role-playing but maybe don't have anything going on currently in the game in terms of storylines and things involving them. Maybe they don't have a big rival or a point of conflict right now, but they still really enjoy role-playing and they would like the opportunity to do it. Let's do a flashback. Let's set up a scene from your character's past and go from there. It can also be a really great way to set up reunions in the future, or to inform an NPC that has recently shown up of like, oh, I didn't realize that your character had a brother. Well, let's do a scene where we talk about that relationship and get to explore it so that the other players at the table, the player involved in the scene, and the dungeon master can all be on the same page in terms of what this relationship looks like and what everybody involved in the relationship wants. The next example they give is dream sequences, to explore a character's inner conflict and turmoil. And this one sounds like a lot of fun. I know that I've done like dream sequences before in a game, but oftentimes they manifest in kind of you informing the player of what they dream about. And like, oh, you had a dream about this thing while you slept. Whereas it can be so much more dynamic and engaging to say, okay, you've fallen asleep during this long rest. I want to do a role-playing scene in your dream. So obviously you're going to be yourself interacting in this dream world. And here's kind of what's going on, what's been on your character's mind lately based on your role play and what you've said, and what's going to kind of manifest in the dream. And then you can go with the scene, and then you can have, this one's the easiest to resolve because it's like, and you wake up. So there's no like getting out of the situation. It's just very easy. But obviously you should try your best to have the scene have a satisfying conclusion, unless it's intentional, unless it's like, and just before the thing that you want to happen in the stream happens, you wake up. But don't abuse that, because that will become very annoying. Transitions to leap the campaign forward in time. So if you are going to be having the party doing a task that is going to take weeks, if not months, like going around gathering allies, building up a fortress, traveling over a great distance, vignettes can be a great way to intermittently like check in with the party, check in with the characters and what they're working on and what they're doing, so that it doesn't feel so detached, so that it doesn't feel like, oh, we just had a 8-month jump in the game, but because none of us got a chance to role play that, it doesn't feel like any time has passed. And so by having those short snippet scenes to be like, okay, and then 4 months after the last scene, we're going to jump in with this player character doing this thing and stuff like that. So that can give a better sense of the time gone by and give players a chance to show how their characters are developing over the course of that stretch of time. And my favorite one, third-person NPC teasers. So one thing that oftentimes is lacking in a D&D story when compared to a movie or a novel or a TV show is the moments that you get with the villains, with the people that aren't the heroes of the story. Darth Vader and the Emperor talking about Luke Skywalker with the giant Emperor head talking at Vader bowing. Saruman explaining the origins of the orcs while he's creating the Uruk-hai. These scenes are so important for the story being told, but in a D&D game, how do you do that other than the DM going, okay, this is what's happening away from the players? And what this suggests is giving your players, NPCs, giving them information on, like, this is what this person wants in this scene, this is their driving motivation, this is who their character is, and you give them all different characters and you say, okay, go. Like, let's play out this scene of the big bad evil talking to their lieutenants about the party and what they've been doing lately and how mad the big bad evil is at this lieutenant who was recently just defeated by the party. Your players would go wild for a scene like this. I think, like, I as a player would go wild for, like, being handed a short little write-up, just paragraph blurb of, like, this is who you are, this is what they want and what's happened recently and what they want out of the scene. And just being told, okay, any questions? If not, this is what's going on. You are in the headquarters of the big bad evil. No, I'm not going to tell you exactly where, obviously. And the big bad evil is upset with the lieutenants for their failures to stop these nuisance heroes that are going around foiling their plans constantly, especially you, who just messed up and allowed them to escape with this really important MacGuffin. And so, yeah, that's the scene. Go. And you allow your players to dictate how upset the villains are and what the lieutenants think of each other and of the villain and what they're willing to express and in that scene and things like that. And obviously, this requires a certain level of trust. Because if you have a kind of a sneaky player at your table who's going to try to take advantage of you doing this cool thing by saying, well, here we are in your castle and dictate where it is and then try to use that information on their character, then yeah, you're going to need to shut that down and just be like, stop it. Like, that's not the point of this. Like, this isn't to give you all an advantage over the villains. This is to give you a chance to see the villains in action and what's going on with them. So yeah, you might need to prep your players a bit on this of, like, okay, here's why this is gonna be cool, as long as you don't try to pull this crap. But I would say don't be too restrictive. If the character controlling the big bad evil in a moment of anger lashes out and kills one of the lieutenants, I'd allow that. That's a pretty cool moment. A lot of villains do that. And yeah, it's one less lieutenant for you to play with, but maybe somebody gets promoted to take their place. Maybe an old rival that was like a captain that they made angry, you can elevate into the position of this lieutenant, or just you could run with it. So don't be too restrictive on them taking control of these characters. But as long as they're not doing it in a means to try and get one over on you as a DM, then I would largely be okay with them doing most things in a scene like this. And that's the one thing that I really love about the vignette structure presented in Dungeon Master's Guide 2 from 4th edition D&D, is that you're giving players control of NPCs. The NPC control thing isn't exclusive to the third-party NPC thing. All of these scenes, because I imagine a lot of you are thinking, man, this is a lot of work for the Dungeon Master to roleplay all of these scenes back to back to back if you're doing a vignette-heavy session. Don't. If you're introducing a new NPC, like a flashback sequence where it's exploring that character's relationship with their brother, give the brother to a player. Say, okay, and I want you to be the brother in this situation. So this is what the brother wants. This is what the brother thinks, and is trying to get out of the situation. And you can allow the players to roleplay. That way it keeps people from being bored at the table with somebody else's scene going on. If you have a scene with the same number of players at the table, then get everybody involved and just sit back and watch. I know as a Dungeon Master, I like role-playing, but you'll be controlling these NPCs in the moment. And so, yeah, let the players go wild. Let them have fun. Obviously, if there's a vital character that you need to control because they have information that you wouldn't feel comfortable giving to a player, that's one thing. But if you have a transitional scene that's supposed to dictate that a certain amount of time has gone by and the party is gathering allies for an upcoming battle, and so your ranger goes to meet with the leader of a druid circle to try and convince them to come lend their assistance, don't control the leader of the druid circle. Let the person that's your paladin in the party control him. and just tell them, yeah, they're principled, just like your character is, and they want to protect their people. And they are concerned that getting involved in this battle will get a lot of their people killed, where they can just hide in the forest away from this threat and largely be safe. And then you have a scene, you can go forward that way. So yeah, I've kind of touched on it, but I did want to lay out in very easy to understand terms how to do a vignette scene and like what they look like in action. And so obviously there's the framing stage, which is where you as the dungeon master lay out the purpose of the interaction, the location of the interaction, when the interaction is taking place. And you can obviously talk with your players to get more informed about what makes sense for their character, because you don't want to do something that's going to betray their character in any meaningful way. So getting their input and listening to their pushback. If you say, okay, your character is in this place, and they kind of go, why? Listen to them when they say that. And then there is the development of the scene, which is where you either begin role playing with another player, or you let the players begin role playing amongst themselves in this kind of structured, controlled environment. And then the conclusion, when you have a feel for the room, you have a feel for the scene, because a lot of times you're not going to be in it, which is why it is very helpful to make your players control NPCs so that you can be that impartial person sitting back who can watch the scene without being involved in the scene and know, okay, we're starting to get into like some circular talk that's like, we've lost the momentum, we've lost the thread, it's time to start wrapping this up. And at that point you can initiate the conclusion of the scene, interject and say, okay, this is where the scene needs to end up, so let's start moving it in that direction. The players move in that direction, put a bow on it, and move on with your session. And so, yeah, these are super cool. I hope that you're as intrigued and excited by vignettes as I am. I think they are so interesting and so cool, and such a neat thing to bring to your table. Let me know what you think about them down in the comments below. Have you used vignettes before? I know I'm taking this from a book that came out an edition ago, so many of you probably already do vignettes. Or does this sound like something that you're doing in your game, you just didn't realize that it was called something before? Let me know. Let me know what you thought of the video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.